Damien Hale stood at the window of his penthouse office, looking down at the city below. Everything and everyone looked so small from up here, just the way he liked it. At 42, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. The Hale family name opened every door in town, and his real estate empire kept growing bigger every year. "Another record quarter," said James, his financial advisor shuffling papers on the desk. "The board will be very pleased." Damien barely listened. He was watching the cleaning crew arriving for their evening shift in the building across the street. It reminded him of the woman who cleaned his own office, Elena something. He never bothered learning her last name. She was just another face in a uniform, someone who emptied his trash and wiped his windows while he worked late. "Speaking of the board," James continued, "don't forget about the club event next weekend. All the major players will be there." The Metropolitan Club was the most exclusive social club in the city. Only old money and serious power got you through those doors. Damien practically grew up there, watching his father make deals over brandy and cigars. "Damien, are you listening?" James asked. "Of course," Damien said, turning away from the window. "The club event. Black tie, the usual crowd, boring speeches about market projections. And your date. The board expects to see you settle down soon. Your father always said—" "I know what my father said," Damien snapped. "I'll handle it." After James left, Damien sat at his desk, irritated. Everyone was always pushing him about marriage, about living up to the Hale legacy. He picked up his phone to call Victoria, his usual +1 for these events, but stopped when he heard someone enter the office. It was her, Elena. She pushed her cleaning cart quietly, keeping her eyes down like always. Something about her manner annoyed him. She acted like she was invisible, like she didn't want to impose on his important world. But wasn't that what he expected? Wasn't that how it should be? "Good evening, Mr. Hale," she said softly, starting her routine. He watched her work, an idea forming in his mind. His friends Richard and Thomas would be at the club event too. They often joked about the help, thinking they were equal these days. Wouldn't it be funny to show them just how out of place someone like Elena would be in their world? "Elena," he said suddenly, making her jump slightly. "The Metropolitan Club is hosting an event next weekend. I'd like you to come as my guest." She stared at him, clearly stunned. "Mr. Hale, I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," he said smoothly. "Saturday. At 8, black tie required, of course. But I don't have anything suitable to wear, and I'm not a member." "You'll be my guest," he said, enjoying her discomfort. "And don't worry about the dress. Consider it a bonus for your dedicated service." He wrote down the club's address and handed it to her, already imagining how Richard and Thomas would react. They could all use a good laugh. Elena took the paper with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. This is very unexpected." "Indeed it is," he said, turning back to his work, dismissing her. That night, Damien met Richard and Thomas at their usual bar. They roared with laughter when he told them his plan. The cleaning lady at the Metropolitan? Richard wiped tears from his eyes. "She'll be like a fish out of water." "More like a mouse in a room full of cats," Thomas added. "I can't wait to see this." Damien smiled, but something felt off. He pushed the feeling aside. It was just a joke, after all. People like Elena needed to know their place in the world. He was doing her a favor, really. She'd learn an important lesson. The week passed quickly. Damien noticed Elena didn't come to clean his office again, probably took time off to prepare for her big night out. He almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost Saturday arrived, and Damien stood in the club's grand entrance hall, accepting greetings from the city's elite. Richard and Thomas flanked him, all three men watching the door like hawks. "Maybe she won't show," Thomas said after an hour. "She'll show," Damien replied confidently. "People like that can't resist a chance to play dress-up in our world." The words had barely left his mouth when the club's massive doors opened. The usual buzz of conversation suddenly died. Damien turned to look and his heart stopped. Elena stood in the doorway, but she wasn't the Elena he knew. Gone was the plain uniform and practical shoes. Gone was the woman who blended into the background. In their place stood someone else entirely. Someone who commanded attention without asking for it. She wore a deep blue gown that seemed to flow like water when she moved. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, revealing a graceful neck adorned with a simple pearl necklace. But it wasn't just the clothes or the jewelry. It was the way she carried herself. Straight-backed, chin lifted slightly, eyes clear and unafraid. "My God," Richard whispered. "Who is that?" Damien couldn't answer. He watched as Elena descended the stairs into the hall, moving with natural grace. Several of the city's most powerful men immediately gravitated toward her. William Chen, the tech billionaire. Michael Ross, the media mogul. Even Senator Harrison broke away from an important conversation to introduce himself. "Damien?" Thomas nudged him. "Isn't that your cleaning lady?" But Damien barely heard him. He was too busy watching Elena smile at something the senator said, her whole face lighting up. How had he never noticed how beautiful her smile was? "I need a drink," he muttered, heading for the bar. But he couldn't escape the sound of Elena's gentle laughter, couldn't avoid seeing how easily she fit into conversations. With people he'd known his whole life, the joke was supposed to be on her. So why did he feel like the punchline? Eleanor hadn't planned to come to the club at all. After Mr. Hale's invitation, she'd spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about it. She knew it was probably a joke. She'd cleaned enough offices to know how. Men like him thought. But then she remembered her grandmother's words, "Sometimes the best revenge is to shine," so she'd called in every favor she had. Her sister Maria, who worked at an upscale boutique, borrowed the blue dress. Her friend Carmen, a stylist at a fancy salon, did her hair and makeup. The pearl necklace was her mother's, worn only on special occasions. Now standing in the Metropolitan Club, Eleanor felt strangely calm. She spotted Mr. Hale at the bar, looking uncomfortable for the first time since she'd known him. "Good, Ms. Vasquez," Senator Harrison said, touching her elbow gently. "You must tell us more about your work with the community college program." Eleanor smiled. She hadn't mentioned that she taught ESL classes 3 nights a week, but news traveled fast in these circles. "It's nothing special, Senator. Just helping people build better lives." "Nonsense," William Chen cut in. "Education is everything. My company is always looking for partnership opportunities in that area." From his spot at the bar, Damien watched the scene unfold like a nightmare. Eleanor, Ms. Vasquez, he'd learned was her full name, handled herself with perfect poise. She spoke softly but confidently, listened attentively, and somehow managed to make everyone around her feel important. "She's quite something," said a voice beside him. It was his father's old friend, Margaret Windsor. The woman had known him since he was in diapers and never hesitated to speak her mind. "She's my cleaning lady," Damien said, immediately regretting the bitter tone in his voice. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Is she? Funny, she seems more like a queen holding court. I just had a fascinating conversation with her about urban development in immigrant communities." Damien downed his drink. The night was spiraling out of control. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Elena was supposed to feel awkward, out of place. Instead, she moved through the crowd like she'd been born to it. "Your date is quite popular," Richard said, appearing at his side. The mocking tone was gone from his voice, replaced by something like admiration. "She's not my date," Damien snapped. "No?" Richard smiled. "Then you won't mind if I ask her to dinner next week? Something hot?" And ugly twisted in Damien's chest. He watched as another group of influential people gathered around Elena, drawn to her quiet charm like moths to a flame. "I heard she runs a literacy program at her church," someone was saying. "And she's taking business classes at night," added another voice. Each new revelation hit Damien like a physical blow. How long had she cleaned his office? How many times had she quietly worked while he took calls, made deals, lived his life without really seeing her? "Mr. Hale," Eleanor's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood before him, those dark eyes meeting his directly. "Thank you for the invitation. It's been a lovely evening. You're leaving?" The words came out sharper than he intended. "Yes. I have an early class tomorrow." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Some of us still have to work for a living." Before he could respond, William Chen appeared. "Ms. Vasquez, allow me to call my driver. We'd love to have you visit our foundation next week." "That's very kind," Elena said, "but I'm comfortable taking a taxi." Nonsense, Senator Harrison joined in. My car is already waiting. Damien watched helplessly as Elena was escorted out by two of the city's most powerful men. The joke had backfired spectacularly. He'd tried to humiliate her, but she'd outshone everyone in the room. Well, darling, Margaret Windsor said, patting his arm, I haven't seen you look this rattled since you fell in the club pool at your 6th birthday party. I'm not rattled, Damien protested. No. Then why are you crushing that glass in your hand? Damien looked down. His knuckles were white around the tumbler. He set it down carefully, trying to gather his thoughts. Now you know, Margaret continued, your father always said money can't buy class. Elena proves that. She has something you can't purchase, darling. Genuine grace. The words stung because they were true. Elena had shown more class in one evening than he had in his entire life. She'd taken his cruel joke and turned it into a triumph. If you'll excuse me, Damien said stiffly. I need some air. He walked out onto the club's terrace, loosening his bow tie. The city lights sparkled below. But all he could see was Elena's face when she'd thanked him for the invitation. She'd known. She'd known exactly what he'd tried to do, and she'd turned it around on him completely. For the first time in his life, Damien Hale felt small, and he had no one to blame but himself. Monday morning came too quickly. Damien sat in his office staring at the door. Would Elena come to clean today? What would he say if she did? The weekend's events kept playing in his mind like a bad movie. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. William Chen wanted Elena's contact information for his foundation. Senator Harrison's office called about a community development initiative. Even his own board members were asking about that remarkable woman from the club. The cleaning cart's familiar squeak made him look up. But it wasn't Elena, just another member of the cleaning staff. Where's Elena? Damien asked, trying to sound casual. Ms. Vasquez requested a different floor assignment, the new cleaner said. Of course she had. Damien's stomach twisted. He'd made her workplace uncomfortable, just another thing to add to his growing list of regrets. That afternoon, he called the cleaning company's supervisor. I need Elena Vasquez's contact information. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale, but we can't give out employee personal information. I own this building, Damien snapped. I sign your company's checks. And Ms. Vasquez has rights as an employee. If you need to speak with her, you can leave a message with our office. Damien slammed down the phone. Since when did people say no to him? He was Damien Hale. He always got what he wanted. But Elena's face flashed in his mind. The quiet dignity she'd shown at the club, the way she'd handled his attempted humiliation with grace. Maybe that was his problem. He'd always taken what he wanted, never thinking about what others might want. He decided to wait by the service entrance after work. He knew the cleaning staff's schedule, but hour after hour passed and Elena never showed. Looking for someone? It was Maria from the boutique on the ground floor. She had her arms crossed, looking at him like he was something stuck to her shoe. Elena Vasquez, he said. Do you know where I can find her? Maria's eyes narrowed. My sister doesn't want to talk to you. Sister, of course, the family resemblance was clear now. Please, Damien said, surprising himself with the word. When was the last time he'd said please to anyone? I need to apologize. Apologize? Maria laughed without humor. For trying to humiliate her? For treating her like entertainment for your rich friends? Each word hit him like a slap. I was wrong, he said quietly. Yes, you were. And now you're upset because she showed you up. Because she proved she's better than you and your whole stuck-up crowd? No, Damien said, but wasn't that exactly what was eating at him? Not just that Elena had shown such grace, but that she'd revealed how little of it he possessed. Maria studied him for a long moment. Elena teaches ESL classes at the community center on Tuesday nights. That's all I'm going to say. Damien nodded, grateful even for this small piece of information. But as he turned to leave, Maria called after him. Mr. Hale, if you hurt my sister again, remember that I know where you get your suits cleaned, and bleach is very easy to mix up with other chemicals. The threat was clear, and strangely, Damien found himself respecting Maria more for making it. At least, she was direct about her feelings. Unlike him, hiding his cruelty behind a polite invitation, that night he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Eleanor at the club, beautiful and poised. But now other images mixed in. Elena quietly cleaning his office while he ignored her. Elena teaching students after working a full day. Elena building a life of meaning while he built nothing but his bank account. His phone buzzed. It was Richard, asking for Elena's number. Delete. Then Thomas saying he'd love to have Elena at his next charity gala. Delete. Even his mother called, wanting to know about that lovely woman from the club. She's not interested, Damien said shortly. In you mean, his mother replied. Can't say I blame her. Tuesday came. Damien changed his suit 3 times before heading to the community center. He felt nervous, another unfamiliar sensation. What would he say? How could he possibly make this right? The community center was a shabby building in a neighborhood he'd never visited. Through a window, he could see Elena standing at a whiteboard, teaching a room full of adults. She was wearing simple clothes again, but she had the same presence he'd seen at the club. Her students watched her with respect and affection as she helped them practice English phrases. Damien stood there, watching, understanding for the first time that Elena hadn't transformed herself for the club. She'd always been this person, strong, dignified, kind. He'd just been too blind to see it. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. What right did he have to interrupt her class? To insert himself into the life she'd built? Maybe the best apology would be to leave her alone. But as he turned to go, the door opened. Elena stood there, her eyes meeting his. Mr. Hale, she said quietly. Did you need something? I need to apologize, Damien said, standing awkwardly in the community center hallway. What I did was cruel. Elena looked at him for a long moment. My students are waiting, she said finally. If you want to talk, you can wait until class is over. For the next hour, Damien sat in the back of the classroom, watching Elena teach. Her students came from all walks of life, elderly grandmothers, young construction workers, tired mothers with determination in their eyes. Elena helped them all with patience and respect, exactly what he'd never shown her. When class ended, students stopped to thank Elena, some hugging her, others showing her photos of their families. She knew all their names, their stories, their struggles. Damien felt increasingly small in his expensive suit. Finally, they were alone. Elena started erasing the whiteboard, not looking at him. I was wrong, Damien said. I tried to humiliate you because that's what people like me do. We think money makes us better than everyone else. People like you? Eleanor turned to face him. You mean rich people? I've cleaned for many wealthy people, Mr. Hale. Most of them are kind. They see me as a person, not a prop for their entertainment. Her words stung. I've never been kind, have I, to anyone? No, Eleanor agreed. You haven't. The night at the club, you knew what I was trying to do? Of course I knew, I'm not stupid. Mr. Hale, I've dealt with bullies before, but my grandmother taught me something important. When someone tries to shame you, stand tall. When they expect you to fail, excel. When they think you're nothing, show them exactly who you... Their community outreach program. She'd worked hard for opportunities like these. She couldn't let her guard down just because Damien Hale was finally acting like a human being. At work, rumors spread. The cleaning company's supervisor called her in for a meeting. Is it true you're dating Damien Hale? No, Eleanor said firmly. I'm not dating anyone. Good, keep it that way. Office romances never end well, especially not between people from different backgrounds. Different backgrounds. The words followed. Elena all day. That evening at the community center, she watched Damien helping an elderly student with pronunciation. He'd changed his schedule to be here every Tuesday and Thursday. His company's charitable foundation had quietly donated new textbooks and computers. But was it enough to bridge those different backgrounds, Elena? Damien caught her after class. Would you like to get coffee? Just coffee, he added quickly. To talk about the student's progress. She almost said no, but then she saw something in his eyes, not the old arrogance, but genuine hope. Just coffee, she agreed. The diner across the street became their spot. Damien learned to like the bitter coffee and cracked vinyl seats, More importantly, he learned about Elena, about growing up with a single mother who cleaned houses, about working 3 jobs to put herself through college, about her dreams of opening her own education center. "Why do you still clean offices?" he asked one evening. "It pays the bills, and it keeps me humble." "You never needed help with humility," Damien said softly. "That was my problem." Word got around that Damien Hale was slumming it at a downtown diner. His society friends were scandalized. His mother called, worried about the family reputation. "Are you having some kind of breakdown?" she demanded. "No, Mother. I'm finally waking up." Richard and Thomas stopped inviting him to their exclusive clubs. Business associates whispered about him going soft. But for the first time in his life, Damien didn't care what they thought. Then came the night that changed everything. They were leaving the diner when they saw Mrs. Kim, one of their students, crying on a bench. "They're selling our building," she sobbed. "All the tenants have 30 days to leave. Where will we go?" Elena hugged the older woman, murmuring comfort. In broken Korean she'd learned just for her students. Damien stood quietly thinking. The building was owned by Hudson Development, his biggest competitor and frequent dinner companion. "I'll handle it," he said. Elena looked up sharply. "Damien, don't..." "Trust me," he said, "just this once." The next morning he walked into Hudson Development's offices without an appointment. 2 hours later, he walked out with ownership of the building at twice its market value. "So you can't buy your way into my heart," Elena said when she found out. "I didn't do it for that," Damien replied. "I did it because it was right. You taught me that." Elena saw the truth in his eyes. The man who had once invited her to a club to mock her was gone. In his place was someone new, someone who finally understood that true worth had nothing to do with money, but life had other plans. Just as things were looking up, Eleanor's mother got sick. The doctors found cancer, advanced stage. Sophia needed expensive treatments and their insurance wouldn't cover most of it. Elena took on extra cleaning shifts. She started missing classes at the community center, letting other volunteers cover for her. Damien watched helplessly as the shadows under her eyes grew darker. "Let me help," he said one night, finding her alone in the classroom. "No." Elena's voice was firm. "We've handled our problems without charity before." "It's not charity, it's caring about someone." Eleanor turned away, but not before he saw the tears in her eyes. "I can't be indebted to you." "Then let me set up a foundation for all families dealing with cancer. Your mother would just be one of many we help." "Always trying to solve everything with money," Elena said, but her voice had lost its edge. That night, Damien couldn't sleep. He thought about Sophia, about Elena working herself to exhaustion, about all the families facing the same struggle. By morning, he had a plan. He called an emergency board meeting at his company. The board members were shocked when he announced his intention to sell his private jet and several properties to fund a new healthcare foundation. "Have you lost your mind?" his mother demanded afterward. "First the cleaning lady, now this?" "Her name is Elena," Damien said quietly. "And she taught me that having money means nothing if you don't use it to help others." The foundation launched quickly. Sophia got her treatments at the best hospital in the city, alongside other families who could never have afforded such care. Eleanor finally accepted the help, but only after seeing how many others were being helped too. But then rumors started spreading. Business rivals whispered that Damien had gone soft, that he was no longer fit to lead the company. Board members began questioning his decisions. Even his oldest friends turned their backs. "They're planning to vote you out, James," his financial advisor warned him. "Unless you start acting like the old Damien again." The old Damien, the man who thought money was everything, the man who would have let Sophia die rather than risk his reputation. "Let them try," Damien said. The night before the board vote, Elena found him at their diner. "I heard about tomorrow," she said. "You could lose everything." "Not everything," Damien replied, looking at her. "Not what matters." Elena touched his hand, the first time she'd initiated contact between them. "You really have changed. Because of you." "No." Elena's eyes were serious. "You changed because you wanted to. I just showed you it was possible." The board meeting was tense. Damien's opponents had prepared a lengthy presentation about his erratic behavior and concerning choices. They brought up the building he'd bought above market value, the foundation that was wasting company resources, his recent habit of eating at diners instead of five-star restaurants. Damien listened quietly. When they finished, he stood up. "You're right," he said. "I'm not the same man I was. That man cared about nothing but money and power. He thought success meant having the biggest office, the most expensive car, the right connections. He was wrong." He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. True success isn't about what you have. It's about what you give. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, and understanding that every life has value. The cleaning lady working 3 jobs to support her family, the immigrant studying English to give their children a better life, the mother fighting cancer without the money for treatment. His voice grew stronger. "If caring about these things makes me unfit to lead this company, then vote me out. But remember this, everything we've done since starting the foundation has increased our profits. Why? Because for the first time, we're not just making money, we're making a difference." The room was silent. Then Margaret Windsor, his father's old friend, started clapping. Others joined in. The vote never happened. Later, that night, Damien found Elena waiting outside his office. "I heard what happened," she said. "Congratulations." "I meant every word," he told her, "especially about seeing people, really seeing them." Eleanor smiled, that same smile that had captivated everyone at the club so long ago. But now he knew the woman behind the smile, her strength, her kindness, her unshakable dignity. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked. "Not at the diner, not as friends, a real date." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "You know what people will say. Let them talk. The only person I care about is you." Their first real date wasn't at an expensive restaurant or exclusive club. Instead, Elena took Damien to her family's Sunday dinner. Sophia, still recovering from her treatments, watched them with knowing eyes. Maria remained suspicious, but softened when she saw how Damien helped clear the dishes without being asked. "He's different now," Sophia told Eleanor as they prepared dessert. "The way he looks at you, like you're the most precious thing in his world." "Mama, please, it's too soon." But was it? The weeks turned into months. Damien became a regular at family dinners. He learned to cook rice the way Sophia liked it. He helped Maria's son with his math homework. He never missed a single teaching session at the community center. The society pages buzzed with gossip. "Damien Hale dates cleaning lady," screamed one headline. His mother stopped speaking to him entirely. Business associates whispered behind his back at meetings. None of it mattered. For the first time in his life, Damien was truly happy. Then came the night that tested everything. They were leaving the ITI community center when a sleek car pulled up. William Chen stepped out, looking directly at Elena. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "I want you to run my foundation's education division. Full control, 7-figure salary, office in Manhattan." Elena froze. It was everything she'd dreamed of, a chance to help people on a massive scale. "Think about it," William said, handing her his card. "You're wasted here in the neighborhood. With your talent, you could change thousands of lives." After he left, Damien and Elena walked in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You're not going to say anything?" "What do you want me to say?" Damien asked quietly. "It's an amazing opportunity, but I'm scared." The admission cost him. "Scared you'll take the job and realize you don't need me, that I'm still just the arrogant rich man who tried to humiliate you." Elena stopped walking. "Is that what you think? That I'm with you because I need you? Aren't you? I bought Mrs. Kim's building. I funded your mother's treatment. The slap echoed in the quiet street. Elena's eyes blazed with anger and hurt. "How dare you? After all this time, you still don't understand. I never needed your money. Damien, I needed you to see me, to see all of us, to understand that worth isn't measured in dollars." She turned to walk away, but Damien caught her hand. "I'm sorry," he said desperately. "I'm still learning, still trying to be worthy of you." "Worthy of me?" Eleanor's voice softened. "The man who gives up his evenings to teach English, who visits my mother every week just to make her laugh, who risks his entire company to help strangers. That man is already worthy." Then why does William Chen's offer scare me so much? Eleanor touched his face gently. Because you're used to people choosing money over love. But I'm not people, Damien. I'm me. And what does that mean? It means I'm calling William tomorrow to tell him no. My place is here with my students, my families, and you. Damien felt something tight in his chest release. I love you, he said for the first time. Not because you're beautiful or graceful or smart, though you're all those things. I love you because you made me want to be better. Eleanor smiled, that same smile that had first captured his heart at the club. And I love you because you actually did become better. They walked home hand in hand, past the diner where they'd first really talked, past the community center where he'd learned to see beyond himself, past all the places that had shaped their unlikely love story. The next morning, William Chen was surprised to receive Elena's rejection, but not as surprised as Damien's mother was to receive an invitation to Sunday dinner at Sophia's house. A family dinner? She asked incredulously. In that neighborhood? Yes, Mother, Damien said firmly. It's time you met the woman who changed my life and her remarkable family who taught me what real class looks like. The Sunday dinner was a disaster. Damien's mother, Victoria Hale, arrived in a chauffeured car wearing designer clothes that cost more than most people in the neighborhood, made in a month. She barely touched Sophia's food and kept wiping her hands with sanitizing wipes when she thought no one was looking. So, Victoria said, looking around the modest home, this is how you live. Elena felt her face burn, but Sophia held her head high. Yes, this is our home. We're proud of it. Victoria turned to Damien. Darling, you've made your point. You've shown everyone how charitable you can be, but surely this little game has gone on long enough. Game? Damien's voice was dangerously quiet. You think loving Elena is a game? Love? Victoria laughed. Please, Damien, we both know what this is. She's using you for your money, just like all the others. Mother, Damien warned, but Elena put a hand on his arm. Mrs. Hale, Elena said calmly, I understand your concern. You want to protect your son. But you should know that I've turned down better offers than Damien's money. What offers? William Chen offered me a job running his foundation. Senator Harrison wanted me for his community program. I said no to both. Do you know why? Victoria's perfectly made-up face showed a flicker of surprise. Because money isn't everything, Elena continued. Something your son has finally learned. And if you'd open your eyes, you might learn it too. How dare you lecture me? Victoria stood up, trembling with anger. I've spent my life in the best circles, building the right connections. I won't let some cleaning lady destroy everything we've worked for. The only thing being destroyed, Damien said, standing too, is your relationship with your son. Elena and her family have shown me more love in a few months than you have in my entire life. Then you're a fool, Victoria spat. She grabbed her designer purse and stormed out. The room was silent. Then Sophia got up and hugged Damien. You're family now, she said simply, no matter what. That night, as they walked home, Elena could see the pain in Damien's eyes. I'm sorry about your mother. Don't be. She showed her true colors, just like I used to be, judging people by their bank accounts instead of their hearts. Elena squeezed his hand. You were never like her. You just needed someone to remind you of who you really are. Days passed. Victoria launched a campaign to turn the board against Damien again. She spread rumors about Elena being a gold digger, about Damien losing his business sense. But this time, something different happened. Margaret Windsor, the board's most influential member, stood up at a meeting. I've known Damien since he was a boy, she said. I watched him become hard and cold like his mother. But Elena Vasquez didn't seduce him or trick him. She helped him become the man his father always hoped he'd be. One by one, other board members spoke up. They talked about the foundation's success, about improved company morale, about Damien's new leadership style that balanced profit with purpose. Victoria's campaign crumbled. She left for Europe, telling the press she needed time to recover from her son's betrayal. But Damien had never felt stronger. The night after his mother left, he took Elena to the community center where everything had changed. I have something to ask you, he said, leading her to their classroom. Elena stopped, short. The room was filled with their students, her family, even Margaret Windsor. On the whiteboard, written in careful letters, were the words, "Will you marry me?" "Before you answer," Damien said, getting down on one knee, "I want you to know, I'm not asking as Damien Hale, CEO. I'm asking as the man you helped me become. The man who finally learned that true wealth isn't in a bank account, it's in the love we give and receive." Eleanor looked around the room, at her mother's tearful smile, at Maria's grudging approval, at their students' excited faces. This was her world, and Damien had become part of it, not by buying his way in, but by earning his place through love, respect, and genuine change. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet, "but on one condition. Anything. We get married right here, in the community center, with all our real family present." Damien smiled, the kind of smile that still made her heart skip. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The wedding plans were in full swing when trouble arrived in the form of Richard, Damien's old friend. He walked into Elena's classroom one afternoon, looking out of place in his expensive suit. "Elena, we need to talk," he said. "It's about Damien." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What about him?" Richard pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was Damien's voice from months ago, the night he'd first invited her to the club. "It'll be hilarious," Damien was saying, the cleaning lady trying to fit in with real society. "We'll remember this joke for years." Elena's hands shook. She knew about this. Damien had confessed everything. But hearing his cruel laughter made the old pain fresh again. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to know who you're really marrying." "He's not changed, Elena. Men like us don't change. You're wrong." But her voice wavered. Richard stepped closer. "I can prove it. Yesterday he met with William Chen again. They discussed you running the foundation, but only after the wedding. Damien's planning to use your story for publicity. The rich man who married his cleaning lady gave her a fairy tale ending. Think of the headlines." Elena felt sick. She'd seen Damien with William yesterday, but he hadn't mentioned any meeting. "Get out," she said quietly. "Think about it, Elena. Why else would someone like Damien Hale marry someone like you?" After Richard left, Elena sat alone in the classroom. The engagement ring on her finger felt heavy. Was Richard right? Had she been fooling herself? She cancelled. Dinner with Damien that night, claiming a headache. The next day too, and the next. She stopped answering his calls. Damien knew something was wrong, but Elena avoided him. She threw herself into teaching, into helping her mother, into anything that would keep her mind off the doubt eating at her heart. A week passed. Then Sophia confronted her. "Mihija, what are you doing? That man loves you." "Does he, Mama? Or does he love the idea of me? The perfect story of redemption?" Sophia took Eleanor's hands. "I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching, how he remembers everyone's names, their stories, how he sits with Mrs. Kim's grandson for hours, helping with homework. That's not for show. But the recording is from the past. We all have pasts, Elena. What matters is who we choose to become." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She drove to the community center, needing to think. But someone was already there. Damien sat in their classroom, head in his hands. On his desk was a stack of papers. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor asked. He looked up, startled. "Eleanor, I've been coming here every night, hoping you'd show up. What are those papers?" "The truth." He pushed them toward her. "The real reason I met with William Chen. I'm donating half my fortune to create an education foundation. Not for publicity, for you. Because you showed me what really matters." Elena picked up the papers. The foundation would provide scholarships, job training, language classes, everything she'd dreamed of doing. "But you're not running it," Damien continued. "Unless you want to. I'm not trying to buy you or control you. I just want to help make your dreams come true, the same way you helped me become a better man." "Richard showed me the recording," Eleanor said quietly, "from the night of the club. No, he came to gloat about it." Damien's voice was tired. He thought he was destroying us. "But Elena, that recording, it's not who I am anymore. If you don't believe me, ask our students. Ask Mrs. Kim. Ask anyone who's seen how much you've changed me." Elena looked around the classroom. Every corner held memories. Damien teaching pronunciation, helping with citizenship forms, celebrating when students got better jobs. "The foundation," she said slowly. "It was going to be a wedding surprise. Yes, but none of it matters without you. I'd give up everything, the money, the company, all of it, just to have you back." Elena touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of sleepless nights. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you. Not because of what you could give me, but because of who you became. Who I became because of you," Damien whispered. Elena picked up the foundation papers and tore them in half. Damien stared at her in shock. "We don't need grand gestures," she said. "Just love. Real love. Built on trust and understanding. The kind that changes people from the inside out." The community center was transformed for the wedding. Simple white flowers decorated the classroom walls. Folding chairs replaced student desks. Their students helped with everything, proud to be part of this moment. Elena wore a simple white dress that Maria had altered. Her mother's pearl necklace, the same one she'd worn to the club that first night, graced her neck. Sophia, now cancer-free, couldn't stop crying as she helped her daughter get ready. "Look at you," Sophia said. "My beautiful girl who never lost her dignity, no matter what life threw at her." Damien waited at the front of the classroom where he'd spent so many evenings helping students chase their dreams. He wore a suit, but not his usual designer label. This one came from Mr. Park's small tailoring shop down the street. Margaret Windsor sat in the front row, representing the business world that had once been Damien's whole life. But she wasn't alone. William Chen was there too, along with Senator Harrison. They'd all come to witness something rare. True love that crossed every boundary society created. Victoria Hale was noticeably absent. She'd sent a letter from Europe, full of thinly veiled insults and warnings. Damien had thrown it away without a second thought. The wedding was simple but perfect. Mrs. Kim played the piano, a skill no one knew she had until she offered. Jorge, the construction worker who'd become a foreman thanks to his English classes, walked Elena down the aisle alongside her mother. When it was time for vows, Damien spoke first. "Elena, I met you when I was lost, though I didn't know it. I thought I had everything because I could buy anything. But you showed me that the most precious things in life can't be purchased. Love, respect, dignity. You taught me to see people, really see them, to understand that true worth isn't in a bank account or a family name, but in how we treat others. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of your love." Eleanor's eyes shone with tears as she spoke. "Damien, you came into my life as someone I couldn't respect, but you became someone I couldn't help but love. Not because you changed for me, but because you wanted to change for yourself. You learned that real class isn't about where you eat or what you wear. It's about how you make others feel. I promise to keep helping you grow, just as you helped me chase my dreams." They exchanged simple gold rings. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their students burst into applause in a dozen different languages. The reception was held in the community center's cafeteria. Sophia's home cooking sat alongside dishes brought by students from around the world. There was no champagne, just punch and coffee from their favorite diner. Richard showed up uninvited, expecting to see his sabotage had worked. Instead, he found Damien and Elena dancing, surrounded by a family that had nothing to do with blood or social class. "You really love her," he said, finally understanding. "More than anything," Damien replied. "Now leave. You're not welcome in our world." As the evening wound down, Elena and Damien snuck away to their classroom. The whiteboard still held English phrases from the last lesson. "Remember the first time you came here?" Elena asked. "You could barely look our students in the eye." "Now they're family," Damien said, "just like you." Elena touched the whiteboard. "What happens now?" "Now, we keep teaching, keep helping, keep loving. But most importantly," he pulled her close, "we live happily ever after, not because we have to, but because we choose to every single day." Outside, the city lights twinkled. Inside their classroom, two people from different worlds had created something new. A love that proved money couldn't buy happiness, but giving up the need for money could lead you right to it. Sophia said it best at the reception. "Some people are born into wealth, Some achieve wealth. But my Elena and Damien, they discovered something better. They found rich hearts. And that, my friends, is worth more than all the money in the world. The next morning, Elena and Damien returned to their normal routines. She still taught her classes, he still ran his company. But now they did it together, proving that true love doesn't need fancy clubs or expensive restaurants. Sometimes it just needs a classroom, a kind heart, and the courage to change. And in that classroom where it all began, they wrote their own, a kind of fairy tale, one where the prince learned more from the cleaning lady than she ever learned from him. One where happily ever after wasn't about castles and carriages, but about making the world better. One student, one lesson, one act of kindness at a time.